The topic that I was asked to present was about integration within the church and within the church, people in the church, and those who come from outside into our church. I guess I was given the topic because I spoke a lot about the Ukrainian influences that we have coming into West Akron. Before we had, all right, when the war in the Ukraine broke out, the administration allowed the Ukrainians to come into this country for on a 2-year visa. During those 2 years, so they're able to escape from there. They only allowed a certain amount to leave. And they came into Ohio because it's less or expensive to live. So you got to understand, and I want you to put yourself in their shoes. Let's say you were all of a sudden going to go to some foreign country. You don't know the language. You don't know the culture. You're a little bit standoffish with the people around because you don't know about what their motives are or what their personalities are or how they're going to judge you. So I want to first of all speak about the integration from within the church, integrating within the church. We have this group coming to West Akron. We found that they were very standoffish. They were very reserved and they kept to themselves. The benefit that I had in communicating with them is that where they came from in the Ukraine was close to the Romanian border. So they understood and spoke Romanian. Granted, it was with a Ukrainian slang attached to that. I unfortunately am not very familiar with that. So my limited Romanian, speaking with them, we can at least communicate and exchange ideas. In that, them being very standoffish, I befriended one brother. And I asked him, why is there such a divide between the two cultures? I mean, we're from Yugoslavia, we're from Eastern Europe, we understand their people kind of sort of, and they kind of sort of understand us. Yet there was a lot of, the atmosphere was thick. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. And obviously I'm not here with notes because I want to speak from the heart. I want to speak from my experience that I had. And in speaking with one brother, he said, well, the reason why we are standoffish is that we really don't know a lot of you. I said, well, that's understandable, but how about asking questions about how things are in this country and try to get to know people like as individuals. And then he also mentioned that there was a divide economically. And so what they would perceive here in America was what they were experiencing in the Ukraine, where there is an economic status level amongst the people. And so if those who are economically more advanced than you are, you do not speak with them. And so the question was, the response that he had to my question was that we don't know who has the money here and who doesn't. Who has the wealth here and who doesn't. So we don't want to speak and be out of line on that note. And I said to him, brother, you don't know who you're speaking with when you're speaking with other people from church. So how are you going to judge them economically? I mean, the interesting thing is, the parking lot is not full of, luxury cars. Everybody drives a regular car, lives in a regular house. It's not a big deal. What you have is your problem, not mine. And I have nothing to do with it. That God gave that to you and not me. And so that was one area. When I pressed them a little bit more, because when church is over, they would stay in the background. Everybody's in the middle of church talking. When church is over, you stand up. The guy next to your pew, the guy behind you. Nobody exactly goes anywhere. Well, these guys get up and they stand on the outside. They're just observing what's going on. And I said, what do you see when you see that? He said, I'm amazed. And I said, at what? He says, church is only 1 hour and nobody wants to go home. I said, well, how is it at your church? He says, well, granted, they have, Brother John, they have membership of 300 maybe in some of their churches. Brother Ruslan, you know better. How big are their churches in the Ukraine?
The biggest one is about 300 members.
300 members. And when church is over, they are encouraged to get their coats and go home. And I said, how sad? How sad? Because we as a body of believers, we like to, we like to we like to exchange ideas. We like to speak. We like to see how your week is. We like to see what's new in your life, how God's working in your life, what is the difficulties that you experience. There's so much about the body of Christ that we enjoy, and they are slowly coming out of their shell a little at a time. There was this one sister that was sitting in the pew, and she had her head down, and her daughter-in-law said, why do you have your head down? She goes, because everybody's talking about me. And so the daughter-in-law says, they don't even know you. How are they talking about you? So there is that difference, trying to be sensitive and embracing and be encouraging and try to be positive. Because what's happening now is that after the 2-year visa, Brother Ruslan, you know better, do they get an extension or?
Not as of now.
But they did at one time, didn't they? Yeah. So what happens is when your 2-year visa expired, you were able to get, I think at that time, an additional 2 years?
I believe some a year, some
Less. Okay. So they don't know if they're staying, if they're not. They're having difficulty with the English language as adults, but their children, my goodness, their children are picking up really quickly with that. So just because you have similar background, it doesn't mean that there isn't a divide. And what's important is that we would be sensitive to that and understand that and help move that notion aside from that so that we can worship God together. There was another thing. I don't know if you've ever been to West Akron singing, but nobody here sings softly. And so the roof gets raised plenty of time. And the way they sing in the Ukraine is everybody sings melody. Is that correct, Brother Ruslan? We sing 4-part harmony. And when you sing, it doesn't matter if you can hold a note. You can't hear yourself, and the guy next to you can't hear you. So this blows their mind because they're just looking around how people are singing, and they don't know what's going on. But they say they see the veins popping out of people's necks because they're singing so loudly. But they say there's joy in singing. They say we haven't experienced this joy. And also now after being here a period of time, they're saying that especially those from the Ukraine who have come and have found the Lord here and have converted here and were baptized here. One of the first things they said is they never experienced such love. They've never experienced such love because we as a congregation reaching out to them and trying to embrace them, trying to understand where they're coming from and where they've been, and not knowing where they will be. That's the greatest challenge that they have to deal with, and pray for the community as we are also as a church, as to knowing where they will end up ultimately. Again, put yourself in that position. If you're going to a country where you don't know the language, you don't know the people, you can't get a job, and in looking for a job, they're looking for someone giving them a high salary because they have to survive. And it's like, well, what do you know? Well, I don't know anything. Well, then, justifiably as a business owner, how do I hire someone who's not worth, there's no value in his knowledge of your product? So that also becomes very challenging. So, Brother Dushan, have you made any experiences briefly you want to share on that?
I would just like to say, as an immigrant myself, back in the 1970s, it was hard to get used to. I was 8 years old, but being younger, it was easier to adapt. It was definitely much harder for my parents. But we did feel the love of those that were reaching out to us, and that's what we need to remember. We're all called by Christ to reach out, to help the poor, to help the needy. We don't know their status, they might not know ours, but it doesn't matter. Those that are able to be used by God, they should be used by God. We should be willing to help. And on another note, you were saying earlier about the singing. Speaking for myself, it says make a joyful noise. It doesn't say hit every note.
Yeah. Brother John, do you want to share any experiences that come to mind?
I don't think I have anything to add to what you said. It does seem that they're very standoffish, but they have also come in like in a very classic way without having to disrupt. They don't want to disrupt anything that we do here or anything of that nature. But yeah, I would like to see them. Also, there's some of their maybe some of their ways that they come to know the Lord and come to the church would be maybe a little different. And here we have a lot of counseling, a lot of direction as to what sanctification means, what justification means, what it means to have faith and that. Whereas there it seems like it's maybe just a little bit different. Not so much counseling, one-on-one counseling.
Thank you, Brother John. Brother Ruslan, can you share something? You're from the Ukraine. You understand them, and you married. Your wife is from the Ukraine, and you do go back. And can you share?
What I can say is, because I'm from there, I know their point of view, I know how they think, because I was there, I lived there. But coming here when I was 16 years old, learning, which was like Lucius, it's easy when we're younger. Like my father and my mother-in-law, they will now learn the way we learn, because when we were younger, the American ways. But thankful that I was able to understand how they are and how we are here now, as far as the cultures and the churches and the people and the mindset. And it took me a long time to understand this American way too. Me being more stubborn, obviously, but I can see. I think for some it takes time, and some are quicker, some are not as quick.
Thank you for sharing. It's a challenge because even coming to I'm picturing, Brother Ruslan, your mother-in-law going to the grocery store and looking at the meat and saying, "What do I cook with this? What is this? Is this beef? Is this pork?" You can't read the label. You don't know if you're going to throw it in on your grill or in a soup pot, And so there's a lot of the challenges that they had to face, and we trying to integrate them into not only our country, but into our church. And that also, like the brothers were talking, all three said, about the love of God. And the love of God, you don't need language for that. Inviting people over, you don't need language for that. Expressing the love of God. And I'm going to slowly transition now into the integrating ourselves with those from outside. I'm going to tell you a quick story. My dad spent 7 years in prison for not bearing arms. So that was in his youth. He came to visit us. I'm telling you this just as a point of experience. He came to my shop because my dad had an upholstery shop. I worked for him as a kid, and he knows upholstery, and he came to visit us in Ohio, and he came to my shop, and he says, we're sitting in the office. He says, give me something to do. So I said, okay. I said, take the fabric off this piece of furniture. So as he's taking the fabric off this piece of furniture, he's talking with the guys, who are working around him, my employees. And I do have one who had a colorful past and continues to. And he spent some time in prison. And so, my dad was telling him, yeah, I was in jail. And these guys perked up. You were in jail. Now, you have to understand, these are not church people. All right, these are rough characters, some of them. And so my dad says, I was in jail. And they said, dude, what were you in jail for? He says, no, how long were you in jail for? He says, I was in prison for 7 years. 7 years? So why are you in prison for 7 years? What'd you do? He says, I didn't take the gun. And the guy pops up, dude, you were a getaway driver and you did not, and you got 7 years? And so, because and I'm hearing this, and there, can you imagine if you took a gun, So is that how much time you get in Yugoslavia? And I'm thinking, okay, I got to go out there. So I had to explain to them the things that some of us who have, who are from the old country, who are first, second generation here in America, the terminology that we use, we have to understand how those of us who were raised in the church, we have a certain level of understanding lingo that someone coming in off the streets does not. And with that, I had asked Brother Brandon to come share with us, who was not raised in a Christian home, as how that worked for him. Brother Brandon?
And I'm the only thing standing between you guys and lunch, so I will try to be expedient with what I'm going to say. I also didn't bring notes because I wanted it to be from the heart and I wanted it to be authentic. I'm an immigrant from America to this church. My wife was raised in the church.
And we had to integrate with him.
Yeah, no, I had to learn a lot. My wife was raised in the church and was always involved with people from the church, and I was being invited to people's homes and being included in things, but I was never a church member. I was never a believer. I can tell you the church has a ministry of example without arrogance, love without judgment, and sacrifice and giving without expectation. And that is what drew me to ACC. And I only understood that over years. It took years of being around people and having experiences with people to realize that this was the church of people that I wanted to be a part of, the community I wanted to be in. So it started late in life for me is when I asked God to come into my life, and he did prick my heart. And then I went on my discovery mission of trying to figure out what that meant. And I remember, it all started with me running to Walmart and buying a Bible because I was working with a brother from the church. I was building houses. He was one of the trades I was hiring. And I watched him for a year and a half deal with the same people I was dealing with, but never get mad, and never using foul language, and talking a lot about his church and talking a lot about his family. It was so interesting to me. I was almost studying him. And during the time as I'm watching him do business, another brother from the church moved his family into my neighborhood, and that was now me seeing how a Christian family operated in a home. So now I could see both sides of it. I could see how a Christian businessman did business, how a Christian man ran his home, and it looked so much better than what I had ever seen in my life. I was not from a home full of believers. I was not even from a home full of good people. I was from a very bad part of Cleveland, with a lot of roughness to it. So seeing these two things started to prick my heart and make me curious about what I was missing in my life. So that was the ministry from ACCN that I saw. So after getting very interested, I finally said, you know what, let's go to camp. Like I want to do the camp experience. And I'm at camp, and I was talking to one of the preachers who I had met, and he was telling me, he said, hey, do you mind if I ask you why you're not a member in the churches, or why you're not baptized in the churches? I said, well, I don't think I agree with every single thing. Not that I knew anything at the time. I said, not that I don't think I agree with everything, and I don't know that I'm the kind of person that can walk lockstep and everything. And he said, you don't have to be, right? And I said, what do you mean? And he just blew the lid off of my opinion of the church, looking from the outside in and just being around it. he corrected me on a lot of things. So then it just opened my eyes completely. And then there was another brother at church, young, good-looking, successful type of guy that I had talked to several times. And I ran up to him and I said, "Hey, you got 10 minutes? Because I need to talk to you." And he's lacing up his tennis shoes to go play basketball. And he says, "Yeah, what's going on?" And I told him, and he said, "Well, do you believe in repenting?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Do you believe in confessing?" "Yes." "Do you want to give your life to God?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay, you're a Nazarene, you just don't know it." And I was like, all right, so this is interesting to me. Had I not had these relationships with these brothers, it would have never brought me to the church because I wouldn't have known it was here. If they would have walled off and said, "You're not a member of this church, so I'm not going to have anything to do with you," I wouldn't have known there was a community of believers that I wanted to be a part of. And during my searching and during my counseling and all my questions, which went on for a good 2 years, I would call one brother after another as I was driving a lot for work. And I would call a brother and, "Hey, I got some questions," and they knew it. It would be a daily or an every other day phone call. And they answered the phone. Like it was never, "Oh, I'm about to lose 45 minutes of my life," voicemail. Like they didn't do that. It was always, "What's going on?" And they were giving me their time from their work, from their families. Like that was the ministry of don't say no, essentially. So I would encourage everyone to understand that the people that you work with are your ministry. The friends you make are your ministry. We are very much about inviting each other over for dinner and hosting each other, but how often do we do that with people outside that we can affect, that we can help bring to God? Matthew 28:18, which is the Great Commission of, make everyone a disciple, baptize them unto the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teach them the commands of Jesus. We're not only doing that with each other, we're doing that with everybody that we touch outside of church. And I think it's super important to remind that people are watching, because I was watching, and people are learning. And if you want to help teach somebody about Jesus or teach somebody how to live a Christian life, they're going to look at what you're doing first, what you're saying second, and how you reach out to them third.
Thank you. My question, though, to each one of you, because we here at the foundation, we speak a lot about the missions that we're into, right? And the easiest, I agree with this, I'm going to send them some funds and I've done my work. Well, let me ask you a question. They talk about going out into the world and bringing you plus one, and that all works great. And we should be doing that. But let me be more challenging to you. I want you to think about your own church that you go to. Everybody has a spot. You know where you sit. You sit there Sunday after Sunday, that's your spot. But you know what? Did you ever consider who's sitting in the back bench? See, our sights are so far looking at the forest that we don't see the trees. The hardest part is bringing someone into church. And if there's someone that is in church, we see beyond them, not really them themselves. And I want to just quickly interject a little bit that the songwriter wrote, and I know he's talking about Christ, "While on others thou art calling, do not pass me by." I want that to be in your mind, that you would think that while on others I am calling, I'm looking for who wants to be saved. Let me talk to somebody about Christ. Don't pass me by. I'm right here. I'm under your nose. I've been coming Sunday after Sunday. Did you say anything to me? Did you take me to dinner, to lunch? Do you know who I am? Do you care? So I just want to interject that also, that we can also do it on a local level. Just interject that too. Not discounting what was said, because I think what was done in Paraguay was phenomenal, the way they have it all outlined. But sit in the back row once in a while and see who's there. The Lord blessed me with multiple sclerosis. I cannot walk. Difficult for me to get into a pew. So I wheel my wheelchair in the back and I watch. That's why I say the Lord bless me, because I can see. When I was standing, I couldn't see, because I'm originally 6 foot tall without my afro that I used to have. And so having, you, at 6 feet, you look, people who walk, being in a wheelchair now, people who walk, they see this. But when someone's down there, it's like, I gotta freeze, and they still walk into me. And it's like, dude, I didn't. But what I'm saying with that is that we have the same vision spiritually. Same vision spiritually is we're on a spiritual level, and we don't look down and see those who are not. And so with that, I wanted to conclude our lesson here today. Thank you very much.